So I welcome you once again to today's webinar, which is the November version, which Preeti, and as I already mentioned, Preeti is heading the L&D function of TCS. And the reason that Preeti is here in one sense is that the program that she is leading in TCS, which we will talk about a little bit today, is something amazing. It's pretty unique, not only in India, but even globally. There are very few organizations which work on the systemic intervention, and hers is one of the very, very few which work on a blended mode of team and individual coaching with the objective of training those who are going through that to coaches themselves and coach mentors, and also with very defined organizational objectives. So it's far more than just doing coaching for the sake of an individual behavioral change. It's about creating a cultural change. And I'm not aware of many companies which have embraced this so far. And I would very much like to know if there are, because that would be very useful to the coaching communities. And so that's a special aspect that I would really like to come out in this particular webinar. And those of you who are listening in, either as coaches or practitioners or even executive leaders, you might be able to gain greater knowledge about that. So without much ado, I'll introduce Preeti to you at this point in time and explain more about what she does and far more about that systemic coaching approach that she is doing, what challenges in the organization that led her to this, that to initiate this kind of a program. How did she get the support of the organization? What benefits that's provided? So in a sense, we will also, as I mentioned to Preeti in a mail today earlier, we will go through a bit of a coaching approach in terms of defining what the outcome is and what has been done, what were the challenges, and so on and so forth. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, please post them on the chat box. And Preeti, if you could also take a look at it, otherwise I'll remind you on the chat box if you open up that, and you will see the questions and you can answer. So all over to you. Thank you, Preeti. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. A very warm welcome and good evening to all of you on the call, on the WebEx. So maybe a good place to start would be to give you a bit of an overview of the program. I potentially don't like to start with the need, because it, in a sense, applies the absence of. And the initiation of this program was really the vision of the global head of HR. And his perspective around this really was to say, how do we create or develop a deeper relational perspective at the workplace? Now, we are a large-scale, extremely successful, fast-paced organization. And in a context like this, getting the job done becomes the way to be. It's how we respond to our everyday lives. And thus brings in this mode of transactional as a preference to relational or social or participative behavior. And one of our main objectives was to say that if people are not together and they're not feeling a sense of connectedness with each other, then work will eventually also begin to reflect that. So we set out and said, rather than lead, let's put out and say, what are our objectives? What is it that we'd like to achieve? And here's what we came up with, and I'll simplify these. I'm going to read out some of these to you because they're sort of long and clunky, but I'll simplify them at the end of it. One was to say, can we proactively build capacity to deal with a dynamic workplace and a dynamic market? And capacity being different from skill, it's really the emotional strength and the emotional stretch to deal with what's happening, how things changing around us. So when there is the stress of work, the ambiguity of the workplace, what happens? And how do leaders deal with that? The second was to say, can we equip our executives and our leaders to catalyze learning and to contribute to themselves and to the growth of others? So in a sense, in the same theme, but it's really about actively learning. To be able to take situations and derive a learning theme out of it to support their next stage movement. And the third was, how do we inspire our leaders to be growth agents, which is how do we bring them to a place where they influence and transform the systems that they lead. So all in all, if we were to sort of wrap this up into simpler phrases, I would say we're talking about self-directed leaders, we're talking about maturity, we're talking about compassion and relatedness, and we're talking about agents of growth. Undoubtedly, the big vision and the big objective is always positive organizational development, which, to Ram's point earlier, is to say, how do I as an individual develop? How do I support my organization? And what is the impact of all of this on the outside world? What is the multiplier effect? Is there a self-fulfilling multiplier effect that actually is a spiral that rivets out of our control positively from self to other to organization, and organization to the world? I say this with humility that these are large objectives to hold, and at the same time, I wouldn't have them any lesser because I don't have a time frame. I have a time frame for how many leaders I'm going to be able to coach in a certain year, but this work is ongoing and continuous, which is really to say, where are we now? This is a question that Ram posed this morning. Where we are now is we've gone through 2 cohorts, a total of about 500 leaders. But we understand very actively that this is an ongoing affair. This is a muscle that we are building in individuals, in the system, and within ourselves, because it takes patience, it takes resilience, it takes fortitude to stay the course. This continuous process is something that will fructify and show benefits over time. The immediate benefits, I wouldn't believe are societal, but they're familial. So a lot of feedback that we get from leaders say, not only has it made a difference to how I see myself, but it's also made a difference to how I operate in the world, at the workplace and in my family.
So, Preeti, I mean, in a sense, I was in some way or another involved with you for about 3 years, from probably about the beginning of this program itself. And one of the things that really inspired me was, even though you said that societal issues are not that important, or they were not the primary objectives, I quite agree with you. They also become, even in the conversations that I had with some of your leaders, that became very important. But more importantly, to focus on this force multiplier effect that you've had, the program has been designed for. So what changes have you seen in the organization in the last 3 years that these cohorts are being developed?
So Ram, just to go back to your initial statement, I didn't say that societal was not important. I said that societal is something that we won't see tomorrow. What we see tomorrow is familiar.
Fair enough.
Is how do people make a difference to themselves and to their immediate circuit? It's almost like a ripple effect that goes in and out. So at this point of time, the difference that we are noticing and we are hearing back from leaders is how they're working differently, how they're managing their own emotional quotient, their stress, the relationships at the workplace, leading to higher productivity, higher efficiency, higher sense of well-being, as well as how they're operating at home. Enhanced relationships, better understanding, being able to see their partners, their families, their friends in a different light.
So, I mean, this is an area which, as a practicing coach, has been both an area of great interest to me as well as a challenge in terms of getting organizations to understand that people are a whole, and you cannot treat them as one half at work, another half elsewhere, and just work on coaching them and so on just for the workspace. So what is it that is sustaining you if you, as well as the organization? Obviously, A large part of it is, I would say, the Tata culture and the TCS culture. But if let's say others are to learn from you and implement them to develop this similar spirit in terms of this work-life integration, how would that happen? Would you have any suggestions?
I'd like to state and use the expression you use, that our belief is that
hello?
I'm here, but I think something's echoing. Should I continue?
Yeah, please continue. I think someone, I don't know if there's anybody else who's not muted, if you could please mute yourself. You continue, Preeti. I think I'm hearing you well, yeah.
Great. So our belief is that each individual is an entire universe in themselves, which really alludes to the fact that we are whole systems, and we bring the whole system or the whole self to work every day. So the person you're experiencing right now is a mother and a wife and a friend and a scholar and a teacher and a coach and so on and so forth. And I'm also somebody who works at TCS. And that perspective is a very important one for us, not only in our coaching conversations, where we ensure that we have an element of the personal. Our idea might be to say, all right, here are leaders, and how do we get them to be, more emotionally engaged with their work as well as with the people around them. But the fact is that it's the whole person we are dealing with. The second thing that's extremely important to us is that we look at a strength-based approach. We believe that starting with what is working and what is good is a better place for us to be than starting with what is not. And the strength-based approach gives us an avenue into multiplying that strength. And that's a great one for us, looking at even the societal piece that we earlier spoke of, to say, as I grow, I have the ability through the impact of osmosis, through the impact of my own change of being, to impact people around me. And that loops into that whole force multiplier effect, spinning out of control in a positive fashion into families, into teams, into workplaces, into society at large. We also believe that there is an element of saying, if you change the mind, you impact the body, and if you impact the body, you change the mind. So we very consciously hold, and I'll bring in at this point of time our approach to the program, which has primarily been an East and West approach. Our belief and our faith hold here has been that we'd like to look at something that we can bring to a large number of leaders. We're a large organization, and we need to individualize this intervention, and yet it needs to be for a large group of leaders. Our Eastern and Western approach is primarily around saying, what is the Eastern basis of psychology and philosophy, and what is Western psychology? So we combine the two. What is different about what we are doing is that psychology we hold on for Eastern and Western, and the philosophy that we bring in is ours within the Eastern space. And we've used a blend of approaches. We've used, for instance, humanistic psychology. We've used positive psychology. We really work hard with the polarity approach, and this is something that has been extremely helpful to leaders. We bring in elements of the Vedantic as well as transpersonal lens. We use collectivism models because we are a collectivist society. And on the Western perspective, we tend to use the ego development theory, where we talk about how do adults develop, what is leadership maturity, how does it build up? We have elements of neuroscience that inform us, and we use a lot of this in our analysis of what is happening. And the last would be that we use orders of consciousness, which is constructive development psychology. Now, none of this is tacit. All of this is subtle, deeply woven into the program, and we keep drawing out elements as we go along.
Fantastic. I mean, if time permits, I would like to go into some details about some of these processes. One of the questions that has come up from Sridhar, who's listening in from Chicago, he says that you said that the chief executive, the CEO, or the global head of HR, he started this program. His question was, if you as an initiator and were to help influence the process, would there be any advice to coaches and others? What would it take to do that?
Well, there's nothing as good as a strong sponsor. And I've personally had the benefit of that. The sponsor might not be deeply engaged on an ongoing basis, or they might be for that matter. In my case, I was brought in with the understanding that I would run the function. So my advice to coaches would be build that contract with the sponsor with great clarity. Define your objectives, define what are the expected outcomes, define the time frame, which is one very critical element of this this kind of work. Because in the organizational setting, our belief is, let's do something, and what are the results? How can we measure this? How soon can I report that I've done really well? And there are some metrics, and I'll take you through some of them as we go along. There are some metrics that you can report in process, but largely the metrics are outcome-based much later. And there's a challenge there as well. The challenge is that no organization takes on only coaching. Organizations take on multiple interventions, and thus to measure one against performance becomes hard. So to sort of recap what I've said is, your contract with your sponsor is key. Define the outcomes, define the objectives, outcomes, and time frame. Or time frame of impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get it totally, because recently I heard one of the coaches tells me that the person that she is dealing with, the head of a large organization, is come back to me with the ROI. How do you evidence that? So that would be my next question. So in order to keep this interest in the organization sustained, what do you do to evidence that?
So I have to admit that that's not an easy one. And I'd like to put that out rather than say, of course you can. That's not an easy one. And the reason it's not easy is that every time an organization puts money into something, we want results. What's the return on investment? What is the return on how much I've spent? We like to reframe that and say, what is the return on the expectation you had? So it is, we talk more about ROE than ROI. I do believe that that is only a matter of time that ROI will come into focus. In the case of ROI, suggestions and what we followed is, one is we look at our culture studies to say what is our culture shift from the previous year to this year, which is usually accurate because it's self-reported. The other is that we use what we call personal scorecards, where we have specific objectives that are where we self-assess ourselves as leaders and our supervisors assess us. The third thing we do is dipsticks and surveys, which are at least once in a cycle, in a coaching cycle, potentially once after as well. And here again is to be able to say, was this worth our time and attention? What are we learning as an organization? There's another very important and interesting element that supports us, and this is something that we've learned. This is not what we had envisaged when we started, but it's been a great learning, and we call these theme records. So considering we have large number of coaches as well as coaches, and we are very, very strict about confidentiality. We incidentally sign a contract with each of our leaders, ensuring that they all feel safe through the process. The theme records are records that a coach will submit at the end of a month to say that these are the themes that I notice that are permeating the culture of the organization at this point of time. And we break them up into categories. So we say, what are you noticing around policy? What are you noticing around work-life balance? What are you noticing around well-being? And they become one organizational intelligence that we otherwise will not get, or get when problem strikes. And the other is that they also start informing other interventions. So for instance, if we hear something about diversity, we can take it to the diversity team. Or if there's a policy issue around women working till a certain time, or transport, we get all sorts of things, or supervisory relationships in senior leadership. We know then we have something to take and build on in terms of tackling the problem. And I believe that that is as much a return on my investment as the top line. Now, coming to the top line, it is only possible to do if you do no other intervention. So if I were to look at just that, then we're possibly doing really well. Because in our case, we've done that. Coaching has been our main intervention over the last 3 years for senior leaders.
And therefore, are you saying therefore the organization recognizes that much of the top line as well as the bottom line improvements that have happened have been in one way or another influenced by coaching?
I wouldn't say that with great confidence at this point of time, but I think that the organization is beginning to recognize that. At this point of time, the organization is surprised that mindful dialogues around self could actually lead to impact on business.
That's truly amazing. I'm impressed by many things that you have done. One of the things that truly impressed me when we started on this interaction was also the fact that you were probably one of the very, very few who said that you would not use anybody other than professionally certified coaches, PCC coaches. And there was a risk as well as, of course, there was an opportunity to be fulfilled there. So how has it panned out for you? I mean, what I would like, probably it'll be helpful to all the coaches out here in terms of your own filtering criteria for selecting the people. And how do you evaluate how they have performed and how you have helped them to perform better?
So maybe what I'd start with is saying, how did we actually identify our coaches? We went through a fairly rigorous approach, rigorous process. We initially invited profiles through personal contacts only. When I say personal, one coach referral to another. And the reason we did that, because one is that as an organization, we don't advertise for such interventions. We have a high sense of privacy and confidentiality around what interventions we are rolling out. And the other is that it was important for us to get people who knew each other and thus could stand for each other and vouch for each other. We put a benchmark and we said PCC only. We had about 180 applications. We eventually identified about 25 coaches with 5 in backup, so a total of 30. And these coaches went through conversations with the team that I lead, and eventually went through a panel discussion with 2 HR leaders. And this was helpful because, one, that the coaches themselves got a sense of what the organization is like. Questions are really informing. The questions inform us in what is the culture of the organization, what am I going to be experiencing? So they got a taste of what might come their way. And the leaders got a sense of the level of maturity, engagement, connection to context of our organization. So this was our initial period. Would you reframe the second question again? You had a second question in terms of how would this support, how could we support?
Yeah, this comes from the perspective that most coaches, at least in my personal interaction with them, are somewhat hesitant about team coaching. And in your case, there is a blending of team coaching as well as individual coaching as well that happens. So if you find that the coach is not shaping up well, or whatever challenges they have, how do you help them? Sorry, it was mine. Yeah. That was my question. In terms of, I mean, there could be other areas as well in terms of what is it that you do. Are you working on supervision, for example? Are you providing some other support in terms of helping them to become better team coaches? Or is there anything else that you do which makes the coaches more efficient and effective in their performance?
Sure. So we run the intervention in two parts. We run the intervention as one part being executive coaching, where coaches work with one-on-one with leaders, and they could potentially belong to the same team, the same larger team, but their interaction is one-on-one. The other piece, and fairly substantial, almost 50% of the piece, is also systemic, which is where there's one coach to the leader as well as the team. And we do group sessions, we do one-on-one sessions. We handhold and support the coach right through from the very beginning to the end. And our approach here is, how do we coach the coach? How do we support them in understanding the organization? When we notice that things might go kilter, how do we step in? How quickly do we step in? How do we build coaching presence for the coach with our support in the process? We handhold and provide supervision. And we give very direct feedback on an ongoing basis to our coaches. We also have a coaching community within the organization now, where we come in to assess issues, look at what might be the potential challenges, how can we overcome them, are there any new strategies that we need to undertake. So all in all, I would say supervision, feedback, support, ideas, hand-holding, and really putting the coach forward. Our view here is that we'd like the coach to show up in their full glory.
Okay. And in this process, while you are using the external coaches at this point in time, primarily for the leadership development and the other objectives that you have, is there a backdrop intention for you to develop internal coaches who are also credentialed and potentially could perform the role of both mentors as well as internal coaches?
Sure. So that's a question that's come up from Manu Chabra as well. And Manu was talking about using internal coaches versus external coaches. So to answer your question, Ram, first, and then I'll get to Manu's, is the natural fallout of a coaching culture is people wanting to become coaches. And we've seen an increasing number of leaders wanting to study coaching to be able to go deeper into the subject and hold the stance of leaders coach at a deeper level. Is there a preference between the two? I would say yes. The preference is still external. Leaders believe that there is greater confidentiality in working with external coaches. They also believe that there's a wider perspective that external coaches will have. And they want to, in some sense, move beyond. Leaders would like a view that is beyond the dynamics of the organization, where they can include the organization and the world outside. So they want to see more, so they can potentially do more.
Okay. So, but in terms of actively developing them as internal coaches, and since you have already started with this practice of employing PCC coaches even for your external coaches, is there a process that you are looking at within the organization that you would be having a cadre of professionally trained coaches, credentialed coaches, and so on? Is that the direction that you are likely to go to?
Well, I think possibly in the next year,
okay,
when coaching as a culture is a little more deeply embedded in the organization, For instance, I'll share an example today. There's a leader of ours who became a coach, and post-retirement actually came on as a coach into the system. And I was giving him feedback today, but how his sessions have gone. So we do a dipstick with coachees where we talk to them about their experience with no reference to the coach whatsoever. And out of 10 coachees, 3 came up, and we spoke to 3. They came up with and said that they took some time moving into a state of trust and comfort because they felt that they were talking to an ex-leader. And thus, their relationship would potentially be as it used to be in the old. However, the coach had the ability to very quickly move into a trusting relationship, establish a good contract with the coachee, and each of these 3 they felt a noticeable difference in their behaviors, and one of them turned around and said that they've also got feedback from their family and friends that they can see things that they're operating differently. Now, this is an example of leaders turned coaches. But internal coaches, looking at developing them, hiring coaches to be internal coaches, I believe it's a matter of, should I say, readiness of the culture of the organization. And we are getting there, we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Answer it if you want to, but if there are aspiring coaches who would like to sort of empanel with TCS as coaches for you, what would be your suggestions? What would they be needing to do?
Well, one is, like I mentioned, that we empanel only PCC coaches. We prefer for them to have some experience, if not most, in the corporate world, having worked with leaders, having been leaders themselves. But one way or the other, what I'd say is send in your profiles, and basis need and requirement, we take things forward. There's one of the interesting things that we are noticing is that we've used 20 coaches for 2 rounds now, the second round of coaching. And we're wondering if we need a creative churn. Just to create a little newness, a little more excitement. And there's potentially an interesting human phenomenon to say we get really comfortable in what we're doing. We haven't quite made up our mind, but this topic did come up in a team discussion, and I thought it was interesting.
Okay. So you want to go out of your zone of comfort in terms of getting out of the people that you're used to. I would like to shift gears a little bit, and you earlier talked about this approach that you have, which is music to my ears, of blending Eastern spirituality with the Western psychology and neurobiology and stuff like that. So can you expand a little bit on that in terms of how coaches can also broaden their own worldview of coaching into this tradition of Indian philosophy, culture, whatever it may be, which can be blended with Western psychology to make coaching more effective in the Indian context?
Right. So I won't say much about Western psychology because I think that is self-explanatory. What I'd like to draw attention to is say that when we learn how to be coaches, we start depending on the tool and the process to such an extent that we might or might not give enough attention to the context. And the context is Eastern, in our case, in the case of certainly the work I'm doing. And for coaches within this country or any other country where you're working in your specific culture, I would say spend enough time to get to the depths of that culture. How do people think? How do they behave? What are their intrinsic motivations? What are their drivers? What are the potential biases cultures hold? How do those cultures at a very subtle level inform how people think and behave? What is the higher order thinking that this culture was meant to have in the first place? Where did they lose their path, if they did? In our case, for instance, I believe that we were supposed to be a secular, inclusive society, and I would say possibly for world over. How do we circle back to that? Uh, my suggestion here would be really learning and studying actively, investing. If I was to give one piece of advice to coaches here in India, I would say invest in yourself and continue to learn and attend to your learning on an ongoing basis. So the more you expand, the more you can see and the greater you can do.
Preeti, taking from there, one of the things that you talked about was also use of polarity, for example. I mean, just one aspect of a Western methodology or tool, at least for the benefit of many of the people in the audience who may not be that familiar with that. Can you expand a little bit about the use of polarity in coaching?
Sure. So the polarity lens is one of my favorite lenses. And this is primarily for the Indian context. I would say it comes from the Ardhanarishwar, or the amalgamation of the masculine and the feminine in the individual, or the yin and the yang, to say that they both coexist. So polarities basically are paradoxes that we work with on an ongoing basis. And how do these paradoxes inform us in a manner that we can leverage them rather than just cope with them? So to give you an example, how do you work with the paradox of flexibility and structure? Can we potentially, if I say I'm a structured leader and I have no room for being flexible, I want everything done as I say, within a certain time frame, I don't like to flex the rules. What tends to happen is that there will come a time where my strength, which is structure, will become my potential weakness. I'll experience the downside because I have already over-leveraged. The polarity lens says that these seemingly opposite paradoxes actually can support each other.
Right. So, I mean, to take it to a slightly different, perhaps to use your word, the lens, if I were to look at something like a MBTI kind of typology, and what you used just now is a structured approach between a J and a P, from a high structure to a totally no structure whatsoever. So what you're saying is the strength lies in integrating the two, coming towards a balance. And as would be in this case, as in anything else, is that a sum and substance of what you are saying now?
So the polarity lens does not advocate balance. It advocates leverage. To say, I might need a different blend and mix of structure and flexibility at different times. Do I, as a leader, have the maturity to be able to see that? And do I, as a coach, have the agility to move with the leader as they move? So to me, it's one of my favorite coaching tools. And it sort of really works beautifully with this Einstein quote, "No problem can be solved with the same lens or the same thinking that created it."
Einstein, yeah.
So it's about our ability to expand our lens, to see more, and thus do more with it.
And therefore, for instance, if, let's say, you are a coach yourself, if you're coaching an abrasive manager, an aggressive manager, which is one end of a polarity, on the other side, there are people who are completely compassionate and so on and so forth. So very specifically in this case, how would you apply this principle of leveraging that abrasive or aggressive nature of the alpha manager to be more effective?
So I think, let me just sort of step back a little bit. I would say that one is recognizing that inherent contradictions are going to be a part of our life is extremely important. That this is an ongoing affair. For instance, be it work-life balance or aggression at the workplace, we have to go deeper into this. And the polarity lens gives us an ability not only to go deeper and look at what's really happening, but also then to say, all right, how do I leverage it? And I'll come to the how in just a minute. My sense is that leaders who have essentially absorbed the fact that paradoxes exist in today's work environment are really smart. Because there are ambiguities in business, there are conflicting feelings, there are contradictory ideas. This is an ongoing process. For a coach to have this understanding and to have an awareness not only of the lens and the approach, but also have the tool that they can use. We use a polarity map, which is a fairly simple one. We don't have the time to do it today, but maybe another time we can do it over a call. Is that tool allows the leader to be able to see themselves like a mirror. And so an aggressive leader would be able to say, I'm aggressive because I am feeling a sense of discomfort. If we move discomfort at the workplace, I have conflict, I have no work-life balance, ill health, who knows what's going on. And moving from that understanding by setting their higher order purpose to say, what's your real purpose? Where do you want to go with it? And then recognizing what the potential poles could be. These poles essentially will define where the leverage lies. We come to leverage only after fully seeing where we are. So the steps to the polarity approach would be to be able to first see and acknowledge, this is where I am as a leader with the support of a coach, and then decide how do I want to leverage it in which situation. Because aggression, workplace aggression or professional aggression is sometimes valued, but it can also be misplaced. So, it's a dynamic situation. It's about how you work with it.
Sure.
Leaders are very interested in this today because they're recognizing that managing and leveraging paradoxes is really a 21st century competency.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a spectrum, which end of the spectrum you are. For example, when you mentioned the word paradox, for example, psychometrics like Luminger or Hogan, they would be helpful in terms of measuring that paradox or blind spot, whatever it is, where it is beyond a point, it becomes counterproductive, and below a point also it becomes counterproductive, so somewhere in the center. I completely agree with you. One of the subjects that I would really love to have someone come in here to talk about would be on polarities and how it can help in terms of coaching, which I'm very sure it can. I just would like to, the time we have, move into, again, with your permission, a little bit more personal. I mean, given the fact that you are a woman leader, the diversity and inclusion you briefly mentioned about in terms of the larger context of the coaching, the work, force multiplier work that you do, what have you been able to achieve in that space within TCS?
Well, this is also a culture issue. So diversity, inclusion, acknowledging the validity of the strengths of the masculine and the strengths of the feminine is also an issue that deeply permeates in the Indian culture. And I'm going to speak only Indian because I'm here. Won't want to comment on any other at this point in time. And it's ongoing work. So we use the polarity lens. We're in fact rolling out a program as a part of our Center of Excellence on gender reconciliation. Because our view here is that masculine and feminine are not two opposing competencies. They exist in each one of us, and our ability to leverage them differently in different situations, it's what informs our success.
So in terms of the practical application of that, I mean, what you're saying is 100% correct. The fact is that we culturally, perhaps even globally, as many of the articles Marianne Slaughter and others have come up to show, that the women are undervalued in the corporate world. For the same job that a woman does, the woman gets paid less. And very often it is said the woman has to work twice as hard to be recognized half as much as a man. And these are truism. They're not cliches, because I have personally experienced this. And And it makes me very angry when this happens. So in a very, very specific way, I know I'm pushing you a little bit on this. In a culture of the Tatas, which I tremendously respect and of which TCS is part, and you guys have been, in many ways, far more successful than many other organizations in doing that. So what lessons can people learn, and what can you share about that?
Well, I agree with you. It's not a cliche. I, as a woman, I know that I've spent a lifetime working with the issue. I've put in 30 years of work. So I know it's a very real issue. How do we work with it is primarily around expanding awareness in terms of what are we doing with ourselves? What's really going on? Are we bringing culture that's deeply embedded in us or conditioned in us into our lives and, in a sense, self-sabotaging on an ongoing basis? Or do we have the ability to take what exists, study it, and elevate ourselves? So I don't think I have a more exacting answer than this to say that our work is to continually work in the space of helping people recognize the sameness and the strengths in each other rather than look at each other with a sight of less or more. Does that sort of answer your question?
It does, Preeti, but okay, let me ask you a very specific question. Just yesterday, or was it early today morning, I had this conversation with someone that I met in the United States with whom I'm working now. And this person is extremely accomplished. She's a minority, it's a she. So she tells me, despite all what I have, and I know that I am as good, better than anybody else, I have, now she's training with us as a coach. She says, would I be a good enough executive coach to go up to an organization, to a CXO and say, yeah, good. Of course, I gave her all the reasons why she should be. Now, if you were her coach instead of me, what would you advise her?
Lovely. I love that. I think primarily I would work with her and supporting her, recognizing what got her here. And that she already has the innate ability, and supporting her in building a deeper state of confidence and self-reliance to lead herself forward.
So which would be, therefore, the steps that you would take even in an organization to help those women in some way or another are, as you said, self-sabotaging the internal barriers, because I had this opportunity to talk to a large group.
All men for that matter, yeah. Women and men.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, to be honest with you, okay, at this point in time, I would rather focus on the women because they need the help, and maybe the men do in certain contexts, but you know what I mean. So moving from there to, again, with very specificity as far as you are concerned and the kind of position that you are in. As a wife, as a mother, I know that you have a daughter studying in Chicago. With all these kind of things, what keeps you going? What keeps you sort of powerful both at work and life? What is it that you would like to share with maybe other women in this group?
But I have to address what you said earlier. I can't let it go. So the whole issue around women needing help is one I'd like to challenge. Not because I have my pride on my shoulder, but because I believe that gender is not an issue around women. It's an issue around society. Reconciliation is about men recognizing that the feminine in them, the feminine attributes in them of empathy, of consideration, of communication are as critical as it is for women to recognize the ability to be objective or analytical. So it's only when the two come together and support each other and are ready to leverage that polarity of masculine and feminine can we actually come to a place of higher order thinking and the next stage of consciousness. Otherwise, we are potentially on a back foot trying to remedy what's wrong. I much rather talk to the strengths that we hold as two different genders. And more on that later, but I'll get to the next question that you asked. Well, personally speaking, I'm an eternal student. I don't say that in a cliched manner. I actually study all the time. So it's an interesting journey that I've undertaken, where I'm always studying something or the other, which keeps me very alive and very centered. I am also a great proponent of the practice of gratitude. I believe that acknowledging what is good in my life and what is working is huge for me. It is so powerful that it essentially takes over what is not working. And it really keeps me centered and happy. And I play a great deal with enriching myself with a deeper sense of compassion towards myself and towards people I work with and people I live with. It's people I live with are equally challenging sometimes. So yeah, that would be it.
I guess that is what would probably make you far more generous and gracious in looking at this issue than the lenses through which I see, where my blood boils, despite the fact I also like to believe that I'm very compassionate. But when I come to these kind of situations where people situationally are not as strong as they need to be, my personal view is, yes, I mean, you are saying women don't need to be helped, but that is not the situation that I see in real life today. But anyway, I mean, that's a completely different subject, and it is a different lens in which we need to look at. And that's not just, it's not about India. And I see this working in the US a lot. I see this exactly same thing happening, and we are taking it up almost as a crusade in terms of trying to do something about this space. So there's a question out here from Mervyn about what role do you think team coaching can play in addressing gender issues in the workplace?
So there are actually a handful of questions. Some of them have come to me privately. Would this be a good time to address all of them?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm going to start from the top, if that's okay. Manu, we spoke about external and internal coaches. You've listed another question on saying, continuing with the theme of creating a coaching culture, how do you feel about using coaches for training purposes within your organization? The objectives are different, but using the coaching approach in training would potentially make it more impactful. How do you feel? I absolutely love the idea of coaches as trainers. I have a personal preference. I believe coaches, you can't be a coach if you haven't worked on yourself. And if you've worked on yourself, you have the ability to see the world at a deeper level. And as a result, what you handle, the material you handle, will be handled differently. So at this point in time, it's hard to go into the details, but I'm a great proponent of coaches who are also trainers. Vishy, you say, why restrict the West to psychology? I totally agree. I mentioned psychology because that's what we were speaking about. There's a great deal out in the West that is supporting the world of development and spirituality, be it the Steiner approach, be it polarity in itself, be it holacracy. There's a great deal happening. So this is, considering the conversation is a short one and we have limited time, we've stuck to psychology. There's a great deal that's happening. I'm personally a student of Gestalt psychology and constructive development psychology. So totally with you on that. There's a comment from Regal Unlimited. I don't know what the name of the person is.
Subhash.
Saying learning to expand, thumbs up. Same consciousness. I guess that's a thumbs up as well. I'll take that, Subhash. Mervyn, you say, do you think team coaching, what role can team coaching play in addressing gender issues? Great one, Mervyn. This is, I advocate a mix of one-on-one and team when working with gender issues. Because people need to recognize their own biases, blind spots, and their strengths to come together as a team and then discuss the same. We are guarded about where we're not showing up. So I think there is great potential for team coaching as long as we add one-on-one to this. I don't think taking everything out in the open right away would be helpful, but eventually it is. Rekha, you say this is interesting, brings up the aspect of gender identity. It absolutely does. And I think it also brings up the aspect of human identity. What is the human being? Who are we and who are we meant to be and how are we showing up today? So this is another lovely, beautiful conversation we can have some other time. Rekha, thanks for the compliment. Ajay Goyal, ICF data says that in coaching profession, there are more women coaches in the world over 60. Yes, because it's considered to be a feminine competency. And for all the men coaches, congratulations, you're integrating well and leveraging the feminine. From KK3, nice session. Your view on matching gender of coach and coachee. Does it make any difference to the effectiveness or is it immaterial? I think it's very personal. Sridhar, this is from you, right? It's very personal. There are times our women leaders have said, I'd like to have a woman coach who has been successful and has been a leader and thus has an experience of my context besides being a coach. So we've then given them women coaches. There are times we've done a mix and that's worked equally well. But I think it's a good place to pause and stop in both cases. There are times leaders who are men might also turn around and say, I'd like a man coach. I'd like to see how they've been successful. I think the combination of business and coaching is another very critical one, and that sort of answers that question a little bit. All right, so we have a comment on ROE. There's a password. All right, so I think we're done with the questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Preeti. And for those of you who are looking for CCU hours and credential renewal hours, the password is D'Mello Systemic. It is there up on the chat. So please note that. And that's what you need to fill up and send it across to us. Preeti, thank you very, very, very much. And I think it's been tremendously enjoyable. And I'm a fan of your program, the process, you know that. And thanks for coming today and be able to explain going farther than what we intended, not just your program, but also your role as a woman leader and what you're doing in your organization and other stuff, including the polarity. Bye. Take care, all of you. Good night.
Thank you. A word as I go, I'd like to say if there's any support that I can provide you in the interventions you're doing, please reach out to Ram, and I'm sure Ram and I can step in to offer advice and support the way, in any way that you'd like. It's been wonderful being.
You're talking about only the women or the men as well, Preeti?
Oh no, I'm very inclusive. I like the men. I like the men.
Okay.
So Yifa has a comment. Yifa says, it's a delightful view of the world. I'm a coach relying quite a lot on positive psychology, worked in the international organization world, and now I'm inspired to finalize my PCC. So I could stand a chance of your criteria. Well, yes, most certainly. If I'm saying your name right, if I'm not, my apologies. Anything that we can do to help, we're always around. Thank you so very much. Ram, thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. And thank you all those who have attended the session. I'll be closing the session now. Thanks. Good night. Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.